Greetings, PsychU community. Rachel Self here with Otsuka Neuroscience Medical Affairs. In this interview, we will be sharing more information on one of PsychU's supporting organizations, Psych Hub. I'm pleased to be joined today by Marjorie Morrison, licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed professional clinical counselor, CEO and co-founder of Psych Hub. Marjorie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I love PsychU, so this is very exciting.
That's awesome. And we love Psych Hub, and we're excited for our PsychU community to get to learn much more about all the resources and the wonderful things that you all are doing. So let's begin by laying the foundation of Psych Hub, how and when it started, and its overarching mission. So you co-founded Psych Hub in 2019 alongside Patrick Kennedy, with the vision to provide an online platform offering video education, focusing on general mental health, substance use, and suicide prevention topics. Psych Hub is now one of the world's most comprehensive online platforms for mental health education, with resources for the general public as well as providers and mental health experts. Could you tell us a bit more about the origination and evolution of Psych Hub?
Absolutely. I always like to kind of talk about sort of our North Star of what Patrick and I set out to do. And I would try to summarize it to say the two biggest issues in behavioral health that we see are quality and access. And quality really comes from moving and helping behavioral health providers to use evidence-based interventions in their practice. And it's really not our fault, because when we're taught in school, we're really learned a lot about theory and theoretical orientation, and less about these different interventions that we call them evidence-based because they've actually been proven to be more effective at treating different symptoms, but we don't really use them here. So one of our main goals of Psych Hub was to move behavioral health providers to start doing more quality, using evidence-based practices to kind of improve that type of quality, and then collect outcomes so that they can have what we would call feedback-informed care, right? To be able to know how to treat people based off of how their outcomes are. So one piece of our business that we were very focused on was exactly that, moving behavioral health providers from generalists to specialists as they start to use evidence-based interventions and hone their craft and really become experts in those areas, as opposed to kind of being a jack of all trades, which most clinicians are. The other issue, access, is a big problem as well, because there's just not enough licensed mental health providers for everybody. And so we really need to train up all kinds of people to be able to help support someone that might be at need. So we can talk about both of those, but those are the two main things that Psych Hub has gone after. And I guess I would add a third one, which is mental health competency or mental health literacy, educating the average person about mental health with good quality kind of information. So that was the goal that we set out to do. We actually are just hitting our 2-year anniversary. So it's so funny, in COVID times, it feels like it could be 10 years. It's hard for me to imagine it's only been 2 years. And I think, oh my gosh, I don't know the next 2 years, if they're anything like the last 2 years. But I really, that was the impetus of kind of why we started it. It was really just a learning platform for, as you mentioned, for behavioral health providers, and then just the average lay people, and then the consumer piece.
How would you see some of the mental health care providers, including primary care physicians and maybe even the full treatment team, utilizing some of the resources that you have available on Psych Hub?
It's a good question, and I appreciate you asking it, because I feel like so much of what we develop, we have the clinician's mind, top of mind for us and what they would want, rather than developing things and trying to kind of shove them onto people. So we took a different approach based off of that, right? So we look at not typical online training is very much a one and done. You start it, you finish it. And studies show that you lose retention every day post when you finish it. So we really had to challenge ourselves on, like, how do we go that distance from knowledge learned to behavior change? And when you start to look at that and you use like an online learning platform for that, you really have to have ongoing learning, and it can't just be a one and done. So then we had to challenge ourselves. Okay, so how do we do this where there's ongoing learning so that you continue to refine those skills? And so what we created is we kind of made up a word. We call it a learning hub. And, you know, since we're Psych Hub, it's not really that creative, but we think it works. And the whole kind of impetus of a learning hub is that the education goes both ways. So for example, for mental health providers, let's say, for example, we train them, they get certified on cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is the most effective treatment for insomnia. So if they get trained on that, once they finish, they unlock a whole library of resources, both for themselves, for ongoing learning, and for their patient. So we are in the process right now of developing an app for their patients. So right now they have all of these videos that go along with this intervention that they text or email their patient. So let's say, for example, in the beginning of treatment, they send the client, here's what CBT for insomnia is like, so that now there's that mystique is taken away, client comes in for session, any of the activities or exercises that are part of that intervention, we've created these little short videos that they could send home to do those homework at home to kind of reinforce those skills. And that actually, Rachel, does like a few different things. One, it engages the client in the process. So it isn't like, I'm not feeling well, make me better, doctor, right? You're part of that treatment. It also, which is really important, we're finding it helps hold fidelity to the model for the provider, because so many times, you know, a provider might revert back to old ways or whatnot, but when the patient itself knows what to expect, they also are, the whole thing kind of works better in that regard. So we've had a lot of great experiences, plus we have outcome assessments that the patients can fill out. So we do a lot of that now. We have several certifications that we're doing for behavioral health providers. We took that same learning hub model. Oh, I forgot to mention, we also have a bunch of videos for the provider ongoing. So any of these key concepts that maybe when you took it the first time you don't remember, we've created new ways to give that same information. Maybe it's an animated video, it's a game or something like that, that we can nudge to providers like over time to kind of reinforce those key concepts. And then we took that same model for our mental health ally certification. And if I call it MHAC, it's what we call it internally. So that is our ally certification. And that's really for anybody. And we did the exact same model where we created it as a learning hub where you can go back and revisit it. There's all kinds of videos. So if you are a faith leader, let's say, or a community worker, and you're interacting with someone who was just diagnosed with bipolar, you know, we know you're not a licensed clinician, but we give you all of the tools to be able to have meaningful conversation. We have a couple modules on mental health competency. We have one on suicide prevention, safety planning, both suicide and domestic violence and partner violence. What do you say? What do you do? What should you not say? We have a module on substance use and opiates. We have one on diversity in mental health, unconscious bias, and motivational interviewing. And then you have all these videos. So if someone, like I said, bipolar, you have videos to send them, these short animated videos to help reinforce those skills at home. That MHAC, Mental Health Ally, is doing very well in the healthcare space. So providers, PAs, RNs, because they're not really going to be people doing interventions like our behavioral health providers interventions are, but just having those skills, knowing what to say, not to say, and then the companion videos is going really, really phenomenally well.
That's amazing. That's really exciting stuff. And definitely if you can combine, you know, some of those digital platforms, things that people can get really engaged in with the still having the human contact, and it really pulls in the whole treatment platform really. So that's super exciting. Thank you for letting us know about that. And it kind of draws us into another area of focus that's really gaining a lot of increased appreciation, as well as it should. And that's surrounding peer support. So there's a lot of different organizations who have developed peer support systems for individuals with lived experience. But you all at Psych Hub have really kind of taken that a step further, and you provide peer support for the providers themselves in a closed forum. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the details for this unique aspect of Psych Hub?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up peer support because it's a movement that, just like you said, for good reason, is gaining a lot of traction. And it goes back to this kind of what we're learning is that people don't always need support from a licensed mental health provider. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And it might be that this year, in this moment in time, a peer does the trick. And maybe next year or last year you needed a provider, and it's not either or, but it peers can really help in a different way. If they have lived experience, there's that connection. And as we're moving forward and learning more about mental health, sometimes that's all someone needs to help them have that shared experience. So peers are really gaining a lot of traction. And then the training around peers is also gaining a lot because it's a little bit challenging to know what do you actually need to know or not know. So we've done it a few different ways. We have, like I said, our mental health ally, which is a really good training. But then we have, as you mentioned, all of these ongoing resources. So we're always trying to think about how do you keep someone engaged, engaged in our platform, but engaged in learning so that we're lifelong learners on this. And these community forums are really a great way to do it because it becomes a place where you can share difficult cases or situations. We have it moderated by clinicians, by mental health clinicians that are on our team. And you can see some of the dialogues that people have where they're really leaning on each other for support and for help and advice and ideas. And it's just really cool. And at the end of this, what you see is there's so much good in people that they really do want to help and they want to support. And so many times we just don't know what to do and we panic that we're going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And so I think we're seeing that people avoid conversations because they're just afraid. And it's been such a remarkable journey being able to give people these tools and see them kind of pushing themselves to have these kind of more difficult conversations and the difference that they're making in so many lives. So I encourage everybody, really, however you get educated or trained or as a peer or just as a friend or as a layperson, we all are in this together and we all really can make such a difference in so many lives. And we are all on digital platforms, so it definitely feels like the way that we can continue to kind of support each other.
Yes, the digital platforms are not going away. We've all immersed in those, haven't we? So I'd like to shift gears just a little bit. It's definitely continuing on this conversation, but as you're very well aware, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we here at PsychU try to find different ways to raise awareness, but to also try to shift the gears a little bit this year and talk about more celebrating mental wellness, if you will. And so we are focusing on mental wellness across the lifespan. So we're working with many of our supporting organizations to highlight some of their resources available for specific age groups, as well as other at-risk populations. So you all at Psych Hub have a number of resources offered for youth, addressing tough topics all the way from bullying to suicidality. And you also have been able to partner with and raise awareness for other organizations that are doing really incredible work in this space, including an interview with Lady Gaga's mom, Cynthia Germanata, hopefully I said her name correctly, who's the co-founder of Born This Way. And that interview was fantastic. I really enjoyed watching you and Patrick talk with her. So thank you for providing that for us. But could you talk a little bit more, including that if you'd like, about some of the youth-focused resources that Psych Hub offers?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up Born This Way because, Psych Hub, we have over 600 partners. And when we see all the great work that so many organizations are doing, it's really incredible. I mean, there's people out there like PsychU too doing really great work. And I always feel a little bit, I don't want to say less than, but like we just do training and learning. So our job is we help amplify all these great organizations who are out there actually doing the hard work, the direct care, the direct support, really making a difference in the lives, as we just want to give them, you know, those learning tools. So the Born This Way Foundation is a really good example, but there's a lot of organizations that are doing really, really good work, especially with these, you know, youth and younger populations, both youth, adolescents. And we are seeing with COVID, as you know, and everybody knows, I mean, we're really seeing kicked up mental health issues for this group. And we're also very focused on mental wellness. And I love that you brought it up, and well-being, because what we all hopefully all know now is that mental health is part of physical health. And so to focus on mental illness or focus on crisis is a disservice to everybody. And having healthy mental well-being, if that's a correct way to say it, is very much the same as having a healthy lifestyle, right? With your how you eat and exercise and all of that, and it's all integrated. So the earlier we could start educating people about well-being, the better. And that again comes in many different forms because people are receptive for new information at different stages. So we tackle it from many different ways, right? So we have our for behavioral health providers, we have CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy for adolescents. So we actually have a certification for providers who are trained in treating adolescents. And that's important so that when you're a consumer of mental health treatment, that you want somebody, if you're an adolescent or a parent of an adolescent, who actually knows how to do that population. We've gotten to do some other really cool things too. We have another podcast besides the one you mentioned, The Future of Mental Health, which I do with Patrick Kennedy. We partnered with Columbia University Department of Psychiatry, and we launched a series called Ask the Expert. And I kid you not, Rachel, they have the smartest people in the world. I mean, we pick topics and they have these brilliant people, these professors who have all of this experience, and we ask them common questions that we get asked, and they answer them. So we have one that we did on childhood anxiety, and this is all free, and it's available on any podcast platform, or we have the video version exclusive on YouTube. We have one on ADHD. We have the psychologist psychologist, I think, who wrote the book Driven to Distraction, which back in my day was the Bible. We have a new episode coming out, but hopefully it will be out when this is out, on parenting. So there's really a lot there as far as leveraging our partners as well. And then we created what's called the Mental Wellbeing Resource Hub. And that is part of, it's a coalition of over 40 partners. And those partners are some of the biggest nonprofits in mental health, such as NAMI and Mental Health America and American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, some universities such as Columbia and Harvard and UCLA, but also all of the national health insurance companies, Aetna, Anthem, Humana, Cigna, and Team United, and then as well as the Department of Veterans Affairs and the National Guard Bureau. Anyways, we've compiled a place where we put all of these resources in one spot for exactly what you're talking about. So people could come in and search by adolescent, by youth, by parenting, and up would populate all of these great resources of things that are, our coalition partners that we really know go through a very rigorous vetting process before they develop something. And then I'll just add one more thing, if you don't mind, is that I know we have a very big presence on YouTube. We just hit 3 million views, and that number is growing every day. We have over 200 free animated videos on mental health topics on our YouTube channel, along with a bunch of other stuff that we're constantly developing and things. But we have a whole host of videos for that population, whether it's childhood suicide, childhood trauma. We have just ADHD, not that that's a youth issue because we have that across the board, but we have several that focus on parenting and for youth. So there's a lot of good content out there. So I know that was a long-winded answer, sorry.
No, that was great. There's so many wonderful resources, and those partnerships are super exciting. And many of those are supporting organizations for PsychU as well. So the more we can come together and continue to bring forth, all sorts of different resources, because the same thing isn't going to work for every single person. So variety is really the spice of life, and what we can do for that is going to be great and give people options. So kind of to extend upon this conversation a little bit and go to the other end of the age spectrum, I guess, could you talk a little bit more for our PsychU community about the types of resources that Psych Hub offers for older adults?
So another good question. I don't have as good of an answer for this one as I had on the other one, because we're just really learning right now about that population, and all of our learning solutions are really kind of for I would say an 8th grade intellectual ability kind of and up. And so that more aging population, they have really more specific needs. 40% of them don't have access to stable broadband internet. And as you know, everything we do is in the digital space. But I will tell you how we're tackling it. I won't say what we have figured out yet, because we're still doing it, is that we're doing a series of what we call listening sessions. And that was actually how we developed Psych Hub in the first place. We did not just develop a bunch of stuff and then try to go sell it to people. We literally sat with our customers, primarily the health insurance companies, and we sat and we listened to some of the pain points and some of the problems, and then developed the solutions to help solve them. We're doing that right now with Medicare. We're doing, just so you know, we're doing very well in Medicaid. We're in 20 different states and Medicaid markets, but that's different than Medicare, right? Which is that, 65 and up. And so right now we are hosting a series of what we call listening, and we're listening to the customer, the Medicare, and Medicare Advantage plans, as well as that population, and learning about what types of things that they need, so that we could start to develop better resources and learning solutions for them. But sadly, at the moment, I would say, for the most part, everything that we have is pretty much geared towards just kind of the whole spectrum of it. But we do have a lot of different videos on, our short animated videos on caregiving, elder abuse, grief and loss, things that are like a little bit more universal. But I will also just comment that the vast majority of our free short videos that are all, less than 4 minutes, they're all animated. And people ask us that a lot, like, why do you animate them? And it's a very clear answer. It's because we can control all diversity with animation. So color, size, clothing, accents, so that we really cross the gamut, because we know if you don't identify with the person giving you the information, you're not going to receive it. But we can control all of that with animation, and we're not sure that style of animation is the right sort of messaging for the aging population. So I just kind of wanted to say that's why I would say we have all of those solutions figured out, but we're working and we're evolving. And I hope that the next time you ask me that question, if I get a chance to come back, I'll have a better answer for you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, setting the stage, you got to start somewhere in that active listening that you're doing to try to hear where the pain points are. That's a wonderful first step. So we're glad that you all are doing that. And you've kind of touched upon my next question a little bit, but if you have some extra tidbits that you can share with our audience, that'd be fantastic. So I know there's really terrific resources across Psych Hub. You mentioned some for caregivers and for parents. And I know you also have some things targeted for the LGBTQ community and some other potentially at-risk populations. Could you talk a little bit about some of those offerings for our audience?
Yeah, caregiving is a big deal right now, and when we're seeing it, it was already creeping into something significant and gaining a lot of attention, but COVID, I think, really kicked things into overdrive. And caregiving isn't just elderly. It isn't caring for an elderly parent, or as like, my mom is caring for her husband. It's also caring for children, it's caring for siblings. I mean, it really crosses on the spectrum. One of the biggest issues is burnout, right? We're seeing burnout across the board. So we have created a whole series of these, we call them our short videos. But and I will tell you, but I also want to add, because I probably should have said this earlier, our little short 3-4 minute videos go through the most rigorous QA process that one could ever imagine. I mean, it goes through 22 different touch points for all internal QA before we send it out to external editing and feedback from every kind of lens you can imagine. We have subject matter experts from color, black, brown, size, gender, just everything, just a different lens, just to make sure we're representing any kind of culture in the right or wrong way. So I say that when I'm touting our videos, that we have, with like I said, 3 million views, over 3 million views, we've never had to make an edit. So we're proud of that, but we put ourselves through a lot before anything goes live, a lot. So we have one video on preventing caregiver burnout, which has been a very, very popular one. You know, another one that's been very popular that actually I just recently saw because I sent it to a friend is how to set boundaries as a caregiver, because that can be very hard. Sometimes we do a tip series. We have one that I really love called 5 Tips for Supporting a Loved One, and it really kind of gives you those kind of skills. And then as far as like the at-risk populations that you asked, we do have one LGBTQ in youth. We have one that's racism and mental health. We have one on social determinants of health. You know, everybody talks about it, but it's hard to, a lot of times people don't really understand what that means. We have one on finding a therapist for BIPOC, which is, you know, good. And then we are in the process right now of developing certifications around cultural humility. And so that we can do better matching for when you're looking for someone for treatment. Let's just say, for example, you're looking for someone who treats adolescents, someone who's certified in anxiety, and someone who's certified in LGBTQ. So we're building out those now so that we can make better streamlined matches when people are looking for help.
That's fantastic. And another parallel, as you were talking, that I just realized, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion is such a crucial topic, and we are in the midst now of trying to raise a lot of awareness and do more training for our entire organization around cultural competency and cultural humility. So that's a really, really important topic. So I'm glad to see that it's getting tackled from so many different angles. And sort of along those lines, you know, one of the things that we know that falls right into that diversity, equity, and inclusion frame of reference is one of the largest barriers that people who are seeking support for their mental challenges is stigma. And we know that we see this whether you're talking about, you know, behavioral or mental health issues, substance abuse issues. It's often a barrier that prevents people from actually accessing and obtaining the support that they need. How are you and your colleagues at Psych Hub working to eradicate stigma?
You know what, it's an interesting question and an interesting time, because we're really seeing a pendulum swing on stigma, you know, and it goes back to your earlier question about aging, right? So we're seeing that if you're older, there's still a lot of stigma, which goes back to me stating that population really needs very targeted, very intentional resources. We're seeing the opposite with younger folks. We're seeing them wearing their diagnoses almost like a badge, you know, like, well, I'm bipolar or I'm ADHD. And it's an interesting time, because I hope that the pendulum will swing somewhere in the middle more, where we don't let things like diagnoses define us, and at such a young age that then we feel stuck in it and it owns us. So, you know, there's also this whole movement where, as you know, influencers or celebrities are coming out and talking about their mental health issues, which normalizes it for everybody. So, I mean, I think where we are today in, you know, 2021 relative to 10 years ago or 10 years before that, you know, stigma is, I think about when my book came out, I don't know now, 15 years ago, that's all we talked about was stigma. And now I think, oh my gosh, it's so much better. So I do think things like PsychU, all of these, I talk about our 600 partners. I'm marveled every day at these organizations that come in who are working every day on stigma and trying to kind of erase it and eradicate it. We're really proud of YouTube and our partnership there, because YouTube is stepping up as, parent company Google, and making an effort around healthcare to get credible information out there. So when you think about that huge platform, I can't remember what the statistic is, but it's so staggering of how many people on the planet they touch, so work that places like that can do to kind of help eradicate stigma, I think goes a long way. But going back to the first part of your question about the work that you guys are doing there around diversity and inclusion, it's really interesting when I go back to our mental health ally certification. We have a module called diversity and mental health, and I think of diversity and color and things like that. But the things that we talk about in this module are even things like geography, the diversity of living rural or living urban, and the bias that you might have of somebody who is living rural and living remote, things like size, and just there's different pieces of diversity that we change the way we treat people or our thoughts in our head, and it's so important that we all acknowledge that. I mean, color matters, and things like sexuality and all of that, but it's so much bigger. That it's accents, and do we discount people who might not speak the same language as us as their first language? And it's just really important that we develop empathy, that we're able to just stop and think about what it might be like to be in that other person's situation, and just get educated on it. So I will tell you, we will, as partners of yours, we will give you, we'll talk offline, but we'll give you our modules on it to help you as you kind of roll it out, because that all helps with stigma. All ways that we can educate people, going back to what you said earlier, which I loved about mental well-being and focusing on well-being, that removes stigma. Because when we continue to talk about mental health or as mental illness, that creates more stigma. It's like, oh God, she's crazy, but like, mental health affects all of us. And I always say this, we want it to. I mean, if we don't know what it feels like to have a bad day, or to feel sad, or feel depressed, then we don't know what it's like to feel good and to feel happy. I mean, you have to have that. And there's a difference between feeling depressed and having major depression. So, or, major depressive disorder. So I think we all have to be educated that we are human beings, and it's a beautiful thing, and we're emotional, and we have highs and we have lows. And that's all part of our mental health, and that's all part of, in my opinion, removing stigma.
So well said. I wish I could talk to you every day. I think I could listen to some of these wonderful insights for hours. I really appreciate that. But I know you're a super busy lady, so we'll make sure and get to an end here in just a few moments. So I would like to just give you a final word. As a mental health expert and an education expert, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our PsychU community regarding mental wellness across the lifespan, which is what we're trying to focus on for May?
I really do believe we're all in this together, and there isn't one group. PsychU can't solve it, Psych Hub can't solve it. This is really about people being hungry for knowledge. Plus, we're learning a lot too. We're learning a lot. Mental health is just it's like a new frontier. We're just kind of learning about our brain and what it does. Stay hungry for that knowledge. Stay educated. We have, like I said, we have so many different opportunities to learn, whether it's, on a podcast, whether it's a video, whether it's a learning hub, but there's other organizations that do too. And, we have a long way to go, which is, we have this podcast called The Future of Mental Health, because, and it's not, we don't talk about lived experience. We don't talk about stigma. We're this whole that whole concept is, where do we need to move mental health so that it's a better system for all of us? And, I say in that there's so much work to be done that, whether it's advocacy, and that's the place that you want to get involved at the local level, at the state level, at the national level, whether it's just learning how to be an ally for your friends or your colleagues or your children or your sibling or your parents. And we always say, when you learn how to help other people, you inevitably learn how to help yourself. It could be that. It's really a matter of whatever it might be that resonates with you. Stay engaged. And I guess I'd say like the last couple things is, don't be afraid to have conversations with people. People are struggling. Sometimes we know it. We don't even know why we know it. We just feel it. We feel something's not quite right. And you don't have to have the answers. So many times it's just listening. That's all you really have to do. So many times is just listen and be there for someone and be present with them. And you can make such a difference in someone's lives. I would just say, just keep learning. We're all in this together. So another thing that we have, which has been really fun, is we have created a unbranded campaign, and it's called Mask COVID, Not Your Emotions. And it is being disseminated out throughout the states. We have several states now already completely locked in to be pushing this out when people are getting their vaccines. And it has a QR code, and when you click on it, it takes you to this site on our page where we call it the Mental Wellbeing Resource Hub, very much focused on kind of that earlier mental healthy side of things. And it has 3 different ways you could search. You could search just by blank topic. You could search by the actual topic or by the audience. And it's a collection of over 700 resources compiled by over 40 partners. So our partners are everything from the Department of Veterans Affairs and the National Guard Bureau, like the governments, to the large national nonprofits such as NAMI, Mental Health America, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, all kinds of great nonprofit partners, some university partners, Harvard, Columbia, UCLA, and then as well as the health insurance companies, Aetna, Anthem, Cigna, Centene, Humana, United, and then some of the larger associations. We have HCA and UHS, large hospital chains. So really we have organizations that we know go through a lot of rigor before they ever put out a resource. And so we have all of these 700 resources growing every day. Our partners add more in. And there are resources in there for providers, for healthcare providers, for behavioral healthcare providers, for caregivers, for adolescents. And the resources are different ways. We have videos, we have podcasts, we have news stories, we have articles, we have journal entries. So it's really however you would want information in one place, one organized place. So we are so happy that the states are getting behind the campaign. It's such an important time to kind of get mental health literacy out there in the hands of people, hopefully on the prevention side of things. So we're excited about it.
Thank you so much. Yes, that was, again, exquisitely put. So we got to hold on to that unrelenting thirst for knowledge, be open, and like you said, we are all in this together. So let's make the best of it and care for one another. We have talked about some really important topics here today. So I just want to remind everyone that we are not alone. You don't have to face any challenges that you're experiencing alone. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please contact the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or you can access the text crisis line at 741-741. And I know we're all really looking forward to the new 988 code once that's approved and available for everyone as well. So please keep that in mind. Marjorie, I cannot thank you enough. This has been such a pleasure today. Thank you so much for sharing all of this wonderful information. I know our PsychU community is going to benefit tremendously from this. Please, if you are interested in checking out some of the amazing offerings available through Psych Hub, go to their website at psychhub.com, or you can access them through our supporting organization section on PsychU. With that, thank you again so very much. Thank you for listening, everyone. Stay open, try to be aware, care for one another, and keep learning. Stay well, everyone.